So I was caught off guard today, and Wizards of the Coast went and released Playtest 8, and it's less than a month since they released Playtest 7, so I was definitely taken off guard. But Playtest 8 is called Bastions and Cantrips, so we have a pretty good idea of what's going to be in there. I have not read it yet, I've downloaded it, and I will start making content on it. I'm not done with content on Playtest 7, so I guess I'll kind of be doing both for a bit. But for now, I want to go over the video that they are talking about this new playtest and do a reaction. And then on Monday, I have a fighter video for playtest 7 that I was going to release today. I'll now release it on Monday. And then content on this playtest will be coming soon. I have a feeling I'll have less content for this one because we just have two things, Bastions and Cantrips. So let's get started with the video and find out what's going on.
Arcana, this one is special because we're seeing something completely new. What is that?
We decided to do a bonus Unearthed Arcana. You and I have talked in the past about the fact that we would be launching Dungeon Master's Guide UA once we wrapped up the Player's Handbook Unearthed Arcanas. We decided to actually do a bonus Dungeon Master's Guide UA sooner, and so that's what we have ahead of us. In this UA, we finally get to visit an exciting subsystem that we've been working on for quite some time, the Bastion system.
He hinted the Bastion system like right from the beginning, and yeah, this is supposedly going to be in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I think it's about like building your strongholds, right? If you set up base and you build a stronghold, and then there'll be a system for building it up and what it can do and all that kind of stuff, I assume. But I guess we're going to find out.
And we also have included in this UA a number of revised cantrips that we'd love to get people's feedback on.
And what does...
And I just recently did a couple videos on spells I figured needed to be boosted or toned down. And I think the only one I actually mentioned that was a cantrip was True Strike. I'm sure that's been changed. But obviously there's going to be several cantrips that have been revised.
What does the Bastion system do?
So the Bastion system is a whole new way for your character to make a home. And this system is going to be in the new Dungeon Master's Guide. It will be one of the many new or reimagined tools for DMs and also by extension players who play in their DMs' campaigns. A whole host of new tools for people to use in their games. This tool, this toy, is specifically meant to allow a group that decides to use it to really delve into the fantasy of creating a home, creating a headquarters. With a Bastion, you will be able to create a stronghold, a tower, a shrine. You decide the shape that it will take, and you can develop it as either a place that belongs just to your character, or you can develop it in concert with the other characters' bastions to essentially create a mighty fortress that could have different elements inside it. One of the wonderful things about the Bastion system is also the high level of customizability. So first, when you get your Bastion, you get to decide, and you'll get your Bastion if you use these rules around 5th level. You'll decide its layout, and we give you guidance on mapping your Bastion. You'll get a certain number of rooms that we think of as just general purpose rooms. They don't cost you any extra, but then you get these special parts of your Bastion. These are called facilities, and each facility not only is a fun aesthetic addition to your Bastion, but even more importantly, it gives your Bastion special abilities, and by extension, it gives your character special abilities. For example, we have facilities that will allow you to have people play games inside your Bastion, because we're gamers, and we figure many D&D characters probably enjoy playing games. But you can, in that part of your Bastion, have essentially a gaming event that generates money. You can have bastions that will allow you to craft certain magic items, others that give you the ability to recruit defenders to your bastion. Still others at high level that will allow you to go into a demi-plane that belongs to you. You can have a teleportation circle in your bastion. All of these and many, many, many more choices will be available to you as you reach certain levels and you gain the ability to decide which of these customization options do I want for my bastion. Now, not all options are available to all characters. Many of the facilities have prerequisites that are tailored to work with certain classes, and you'll see that rather than having specific classes as the prerequisites, we typically have class features. And because class features are shared among multiple classes, that means that multiple classes typically qualify for...
I assume he's talking about things like extra attack, right? And I should mention that, so for people who've only played 5th edition, this all might sound incredibly new, but there have been built-in Bastion systems, not called Bastion, but stronghold systems built into D&D since 1st edition. In 5th edition, it was absent, not necessarily notoriously absent, because I don't think it was ever a heavily used portion of the game. But the idea of strongholds, this has been explored since the 70s.
Facilities that have prerequisites. Some concrete examples. We have some facilities that require you to have certain weapon capabilities. And so those facilities are going to appeal to classes like fighters and rangers and paladins and barbarians. We have others that require certain spellcasting capabilities. And you, if you are a member of a class that is a hybrid class, like the ranger and the paladin that have a mix of potent weapon abilities and spellcasting, you'll find that you qualify for a really fun mixture of facility options. The other element of Bastions that we look forward to people playing with is the sense of time passing. Bastions have this notion of essentially your bastion getting to take a turn.
Yeah.
And you can take a turn once every 7 days, and every 7 days you can issue a particular order to your bastion. And we give you a set of order options. You can almost think of these as like the action options that characters have. Bastions have a set of order options. Each order does a different thing, and different facilities respond to different orders. So a particular facility might do something special if you issue one of the particular orders in the game. You also have the option of not issuing an order at all. This will particularly happen often when you're not at home.
Yeah.
Because your bastion will have essentially employees in it, hirelings, to use the more traditional D&D term, who will keep it running while you're out adventuring. And if you don't issue an order that leads to a magic item being produced that you can have when you come back, or income being generated, or whatever the special order is, there instead occurs the maintenance order. And some things still occur that are beneficial when maintenance occurs, but then you also open your bastion up to a random event happening. And so one of the entertaining parts of Bastions is that things can happen within and to the bastion while you're away on your adventures. And so when you come back, you can find out what the heck happened.
Yeah.
What is the product that was produced, or the other benefit that was created. The other thing that happens whenever these bastion turns occur and you issue an order is you generate a new currency called Bastion points. Those points you can use when you level up to purchase a magic item, and you can also use those points to extend your influence in the region around your bastion And you can also spend those points to have your character revived back at home if you die out on an adventure and your group has no way of bringing you back. If you have generated enough sort of Bastion power, which is represented by Bastion points, you can tap into that if necessary to have essentially your hirelings drag you home. And
So it sounds like there's quite a bit of detail here, and certainly previous editions of D&D didn't have a lot of details when it came to strongholds and the customization options. So this sounds very cool. I will mention I'm aware of third-party products out right now that have a more detailed system for strongholds and such. But what he's describing here sounds pretty cool. I'm going to have to read it and analyze it and all that. But I am also thinking when we're talking about things like character creation, like I always, if you go to any of my builds, I avoid magic items because I don't know what magic items I'm going to get. Sounds like I might be able to customize that to some degree, which is pretty interesting. If that's built into the system, I'm going to have to change how I build characters.
get you patched up and adventure ready again.
Nice.
Now, this system is designed to stand on its own 2 feet, meaning you can drop it into a campaign and it has within itself everything you need to use it. That also means that it is ripe for you to use it in your games now. One of the reasons we wanted to get this out into people's hands early is, first, we're just really eager to find out what people think.
Yeah.
But second, this is so just ready to use and doesn't sort of rely on anything else going on in either the 2014 or the 2024 rule books, that you could take this Bastion system and use it right now in Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. You could use it in upcoming Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse.
Especially with how many different shops there are in that setting.
Yes.
It's the city of Sigil. So
Yes.
there's just about anything you could possibly want to find. It's the best place for a business.
And there are certainly a few things here where, a prerequisite might point towards something that's in the 2024 versions of some of the classes, but you will find that this is ready to go with your 2014 rulebooks, which has been our approach internally with how we playtest everything for the rules revision. Because in our internal playtests for next year's new version of the Player's Handbook and the other core books, is we use the 2014 rule books and we simply pair those rule books with whatever new version of something that we are testing. So the game that we are playing internally on an almost weekly basis is the 2014 rule books mixed with the material that will appear in the revised core rule books. And so again, I encourage people, please read this and give us your feedback, but also play with it. And that's my encouragement really with everything that we released in Unearthed Arcana, is try it out in your current games, because this material is designed to work not only with the upcoming core rulebooks, but also the existing ones, revised spells that we provide, new feats, new versions of subclasses or classes. You can start playing with them now.
Yeah. The idea of Bastions is something that comes up a lot, whether it's
The one thing about playtesting a system of strongholds is I would think that kind of system is going to be more of a long-term thing. Like, you got a long-term campaign and things are happening week after week after week of play. I don't know how much feedback from actual playtesting they're going to get from players with the tiny windows they give us to fill in the surveys. I don't know if they're going to do the survey differently for this one, but if it's kind of the standard thing where a week from now the survey's open, another week or two and it's closed, I don't think we could provide them a whole lot of play testing feedback for the Bastion system, unless it works very differently than I'm assuming.
Sometimes you're in a flying castle and this is your home base, but there's a home base always seems to happen. Like I love owning property in Ravenloft for some reason, because it's just so fundamental to like Gothic horror that something bad happens to your house.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and in some ways, it's sort of a D&D tradition that as soon as you have property, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Which is why we included the random events in the Bastion system.
Yeah.
A DM, of course, can also come up with special events, but we wanted there to be a ready-to-use way to have those unexpected circumstances surrounding this place that you now care about that also has people in it that you care about. The Bastion system also addresses something in the 2014 downtime system that we've been wanting to address for some time. And that is our downtime rules in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, do a really good job of providing you some crunchy options for things you can do between adventures. Or on an adventure that maybe where the heat is a little lower, you're not spending most of your time fighting, you've got time to shop, to research things and whatnot. But one of the issues with those options is they all require your character to be doing something. And the issue is many campaigns don't have time for that. Many campaigns involve stories where the characters are trying to save the world.
Yeah.
There's a ticking clock. They don't.
Yeah, I'd say more campaigns than not. I don't see you using the Bastion system because you just don't have time to be building strongholds when you are, navigating the forests of Chult, searching for a Serac and his tomb of horrors. So, but it depends on the campaign, and certainly with homebrew campaigns, some of them are meant to last a long, long time. In which case, this definitely could be used. But again, they're not going to get playtest feedback on it with a whole lot of play testing in the matter of a month or so.
Do X, that city's going to fall into Avernus, or whatever the thing is that they're fighting against. And we wanted to provide a way for you to gain access to some of that really fun world texture that exists in the downtime rules, even while you're adventuring. And so the Bastion system provides a way for you to do that, because while you're away, you have people back at home that can be doing these things.
But still, like if the entire campaign takes place over a week or two, you're not doing very much with your Bastion system while you're away.
That will, again, essentially have a gift for you when you come back. It also is a way for players to get a taste of what it's like to be a dungeon master. Often when players think about making the leap from playing to DMing, sometimes there can be some trepidation because it will feel like, well, what the DM does is so different from what I do as a player. Even though many of us know who have been on either side of the screen know that what the DM does is very similar, but just on a larger scale. Rather than thinking about what are the motivations and decisions of this one character, it's instead what are the motivations and decisions of whole groups of characters or whole kingdoms. But we wanted to make a clearer connection between those two experiences, the player experience and the DM experience. We wanted to give players a way to be responsible for a place, for mapping it, and also to be responsible for the NPCs in it. So we often think of the Bastion system as a way for players to be mini DMs, where they have this piece of the world that they're the dungeon master of it. They're deciding what goes on inside the walls of their bastion.
That's perfect. Yeah. It's also it's a good place for villains to like tick off the players.
Yes. Yeah.
There's something that happens to it. But yeah, you're right. That's like kind of like that's like the first building block. So the first seed to get someone interested in dungeon mastering, because now you're managing stuff. You're coming up with story in your head for this location. So it's very sneaky.
Well, it's not sneaking. We're telling you we're doing it.
We're inviting you to be a dungeon master. Look how fun this is.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so the other part of this Unearthed Arcana are some cantrips. We couldn't help ourselves.
Yeah.
we have a set of cantrips.
Yeah.
So we have been waiting for a spell redesign for a while. Cantrips, I guess, is a logical place to start.
That when we did the Big Players Handbook survey in 2021, some of those cantrips didn't score particularly well in terms of satisfaction. We have all.
No kidding. I would love to know what the percentage satisfaction was for True Strike. Like, did anyone say they were satisfied with it? And if so, why?
Already in this Player's Handbook Unearthed Arcana series that's been going on since last year, we have already brought some of those cantrips into the playtest, but we had more that we wanted to get into the playtest stream, and we didn't want them to wait for our next dedicated Player's Handbook UA. So the Bastions, which are the star of this article, they have in their sort of sidecar this fun selection.
And whether Bastions is the main part of this playtest or not, you can be certain my first video where I actually go through mechanics in it is going to be on the cantrips. Of course it is.
Of cantrips. And cantrips are really important to us because for any character who is either a full spellcaster or dabbling in spellcasting, cantrips are often their bread and butter. Cantrips also appear in many of our monsters. And so it's important for the game, whether you're a player or a dungeon master, that the cantrip ecosystem be healthy and fun and diverse. And so you'll see here with these revisions, we are targeting exactly those elements. Fun, diverse, making sure any pain points are sanded away. And so the cantrips that people are going to find here run the gamut from things like Acid Splash to True Strike. Some of these have had just small but important quality of life improvements. So the very first cantrip in the list, Acid Splash, is largely the cantrip that people are familiar with, but it has now been turned from you pick two creatures next to each other and target them to essentially your first area of effect.
Your first AoE.
Your first AoE, because now it creates this 5-foot radius sphere explosion that can still catch two creatures, but might even catch more. If you're playing on the grid and you.
That's definitely, if you're playing on a grid, 5-foot radius, because you choose an intersection of squares, would be 4 squares. So that could be 4 medium-sized creatures, or depending how they're situated, even 4 large or bigger creatures. So that definitely sounds better for Acid Splash, and I wonder if that's going to be the way it is. I guess I'm still processing that this Unearthed Arcana even just came out. But my guess is that most of the cantrips will probably be better than they were, which I think is good because as much as we talk about spellcasters versus non-spellcasters, you got to remember that with a cantrip, anyone can get a cantrip. Anyone can cast it as often as they like. It scales with your character level, not your class level. So you can get a cantrip on any character, and if the cantrip is good, it's a nice little tool and option for them. And right now, we have a lot of cantrips that are mostly thematic, and or there's something that they're just not good enough that you'd ever use them. Acid Splash is a good example. The damage is so low on Acid Splash that potentially hitting 2 creatures with it probably isn't going to be the best option for anyone at any time. But now I'm thinking, if I had a Warlock and I took Agonizing Blast on Acid Splash and I could hit 2 or 3 creatures with it, it might actually be more effective than putting it on Eldritch Blast. So that's quite a change.
Have it explode at the intersection
Or put it on
of,
both.
the lines.
Yeah.
And if there's a bunch of creatures bunched up, I mean, you could get up to 4 creatures.
Yeah.
Or even more if they're tiny and they're crammed in, and they're crammed
Oh,
in
you
there.
can't put it on both. Ignore that.
Now, so we have on one end that meaningful quality of life improvement in Acid Splash, but then on the other end with True Strike, we have a total redesign.
Yeah.
Good.
True Strike is a cantrip that has always had a cool concept of I'm a spellcaster, and using magic, I'm going to direct my strike. The way we implemented it, though, in 2014, because of how the action economy works, it meant that it was rarely optimal for almost anybody to use it.
Yeah.
And when
He is understating that. It's never optimal for anyone to use it, really. I just don't ever see it used.
we designed True Strike almost a decade ago, we at the time were still new ourselves as designers to using advantage and disadvantage in the game.
Yeah.
And we're actually very cautious in how we used those mechanics in certain places. And you can absolutely see that caution in the 2014 version of True Strike. The new version is a completely different take. It's still all about magic guiding your strike. Your weapon strike is not about how strong you are or how dexterous you are. It is about your magic guiding you to your target. But how that is now represented is with this cantrip, similar to cantrips like Green Flame Blade, it includes the weapon strike itself in the cantrip.
Right.
And you are making that weapon strike using your spellcasting ability rather than strength or dex. We have a few others that have been completely redesigned. Blade Ward is another.
That's a reaction now.
Yes, Blade Ward
Perfect.
is now a
Oh,
reaction.
reaction. Nice.
And it allows you to impose disadvantage on somebody's attack against you. And it has now an upgrade at higher levels where sort of the range at which the attacker can be gets further and further away.
Oh, nice.
You can think of it as the sort of protection fighting style.
So certain cantrips have always scaled, right? So Acid Splash is an example. And in the scalings 5, 11, and 17. And I see online all the time people saying that they would love to see other cantrips scale as well. Scaling the range of a cantrip, that sounds really interesting.
But just for yourself.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
for the spellcaster who doesn't have anything else demanding their reaction, and many of our spellcasters rarely, if ever, make opportunity attacks. They don't all have shield at the ready. And so
Yes,
Blade
they do.
Ward is a great, in this new form, a great
If they're
fallback
optimal.
option.
Yeah.
Of I don't have anything else to use with my reaction, and oh no, someone's attacking me. Maybe imposing disadvantage on it will cause them to miss.
Definitely making the Eldritch Knight even juicier now. Yeah.
If the Eldritch Knight is fine, not having the potential to make an opportunity attack.
Yeah.
But yeah, Blade Ward is meant to be a fallback option. And really, it's important to think of all cantrips as fallback options. Cantrips are the thing you cast when you either can't or don't want to cast a spell of first level or higher. Friends, completely redesigned. It now just charms the person.
Yeah.
And it's very short. It no longer makes them hostile toward you. And it's important when people look at this, it's important for people to remember what the charmed condition does and what it doesn't do.
Right. Yeah.
The charmed condition,
So what he's going to remind people here, I remind them all the time, charmed is not mind control. You do not control the person you charm. All it does is it enhances your ability to be persuasive to them. And so you get advantage on charisma checks to interact with them. I assume they're keeping that as is, but that's all it does. So if you have a character who's, a bard with expertise in persuasion, they're potentially better at influencing the person you've charmed than you are. It all depends on how those scores interact. but you're just getting advantage. That's all it is.
Contrary to sometimes the perceptions that people have, is not mind control. The charm
Yeah.
condition simply gives you advantage on your charisma checks with the charmed creature.
Yeah.
And the closest it comes to any kind of serious beguilement is while they're charmed by you, they can't attack you. That's it. So we want to see if this new version means that it can now find a place in people's spellcasting cycles, particularly outside combat. And so we'll be...
It's just occurred to me now. So he's also explained that they can't attack you when they're charmed. I had forgotten to mention that, and I know if I don't mention it now, people will let me know that I forgot to mention it.
to get people's playtest feedback on it.
That's awesome. Again, that feedback is critical to all of this. That's why we do these videos.
Yes.
That's why we have you playtest. Give us the feedback. That is like the best way, especially taking the survey. That's the best way to tell us how this is working.
Absolutely. Our team does look online at people's discussions, but where our team spends most of its time when it comes to digging into people's thoughts on different elements of the game, it's through the surveys. We currently have 3 members of our design team who are spending substantial amounts of their time reading what people are writing. And
I can't imagine that job right now, because in the last 2 playtests, the surveys were so long. Just working through one person's survey responses would take a long time.
Not only that feedback that's coming in, but then our analysis of it is having a powerful impact on where things are headed for the game.
And again, to note, like, this is all like these new rules, the cantrips, the Bastion system, and all the classes that we've been playtesting. You can use those now for Planescape, for Big Beast, for Fandelver. Like, that's the intention. This all works together.
Yep.
That is the point of all of it. So you don't need to wait to play those adventures with the 2014. You can start playtesting in your existing campaigns.
Absolutely.
Because that's how seamlessly everything's working together.
And it will become even more and more seamless as we transition out of public playtesting to nailing things down in the book.
It's not perfectly seamless, though. I can tell you, because I do playtest this stuff. Not in like a long-standing campaign, but we do like one-shots to playtest these regularly. And right now we cannot playtest the Bard, because the Unearthed Arcana Bard, the most recent version, relied on the 3 big spell lists. That no longer exists in the playtest, so it doesn't work. So we cannot playtest that class right now. So it's not always seamless.
Books. And then next year, people will get to start seeing previews of the shape things are actually going to take in the books themselves. Because the other thing that it's important for us to occasionally come back to, you and I have talked about it before, is that UA, while it is a pivotal part of our development process, does not represent necessarily what the final version of anything will be. It's a snapshot of where we are in our development process, and then the feedback we get feeds our dev work in many deep and meaningful ways, but ultimately the final version is what you're going to see in the books, and often there will be changes as we develop things, as we knit everything together to make sure that it works cohesively as a massive game.
And sometimes that system works, and sometimes it does not work. I mean, we've seen stuff that's overpowered in Unearthed Arcana, and then they, publish it, and then they've reduced the power level, and it works okay. And there's a bit of pain at first. It's like, oh, the Rune Knight used to be able to do this and that and the other in the Unearthed Arcana, but then you play the Rune Knight, and it's still pretty powerful. But then you have other cases, like you had the Peace and Twilight domains for Cleric. They had an Unearthed Arcana version that obviously they were ultimately unsatisfied with. So they put out a new Peace and Twilight domain in Tasha's that no one had playtested, and they're wildly overpowered. So There you go.
Game with thousands of moving parts.
So with Unearthed Arcana, we like to look at all the scores from the survey results. You have those scores today. So like, what did we
He has the scores from Playtest 7 already? Really?
learn?
We have the scores for Player's Handbook Playtest 6.
Oh, 6.
And
okay.
as always, not only
I'm like, Playtest 7 survey, I think it closed today.
the scores, but also the written feedback have provided a fascinating sets of insights, perspectives that we're now incorporating into our work. One of the main messages we got from UA6 is that most of the classes in it, people are feeling really good about. So the rogue, the paladin, the cleric, the bard, and even
the bard is currently unplayable. The cleric didn't have a lot of changes, and there were a couple there that I hope they realize need work. Like the one where they can just get their god to cast wish for them.
the druid. The druid struggled the last time we came up. All of those classes received satisfaction scores in either the 70s or up into the 80s, with the rogue overall score at 89%. In that,
So what that tells us is when we see the rogue in the 2024 Player's Handbook, the Playtest 6 version probably is going to be extremely close to that version, because they don't like to mess around with something that scores that high. When something scores 70 or above, they consider that good enough. And that doesn't mean they won't tweak it, but it does mean that they definitely, if it scores over 70, it meets their targets. Their ultimate goal is to have as much with approval 70% and above as possible. That is their threshold.
group, the class with the lowest satisfaction score was the druid, but even the druid made it into the 70s, and many of the druids.
So what he's suggesting there is, because Playtest 6 was big, he's saying that every class scores 70% or above. So yeah, that now again they're going to have to change the bard. They have no option.
Individual features even made it up into the 80s in terms of satisfaction. Like, people really are enjoying the new elemental fury, the wild resurgence. So we continue to see a lot of positivity about new features that we've been introducing in the various classes. There were a couple of pain points in this latest version of the druid, the main ones being wild shape and the Circle of the Moon subclass.
Yeah.
The other subclasses, Circle of the Land, got 86%.
Circle of the Land was amazing. And I'm not a big fan of Circle of the Land, but I'm about to become a big fan of it.
That is a massive satisfaction improvement over the 2014 version. Circle of the Sea, the brand new subclass, got 80%. And Circle of the Moon definitely improved. So we're on the right trajectory with it.
Yeah.
But we need at least one more round with it in UA. So our plan is the Druid base class will go back out in our next Player's Handbook dedicated on Unearthed Arcana, mostly to give a revised version of the Circle of the Moon. Because base class of the Druid overall is getting thumbs up, with mostly just Wild Shape and Arch Druid needing a little more love, but we're on a good path with the Druid.
I mean, with the Druid, the hard part is Wild Shape, because it's such a mess in the 2014 Player's Handbook that to even keep it thematically the same, but work in a way that works well with the game, that is a huge ask. It really is. And I'm curious what their next revision will be with it. Obviously, we're going to see another version of Wild Shape again.
We are still seeing with the Druid, and we knew this. Still, essentially two main factions of people who really liked
Templates
the wild-shaped
versus
templates
stats.
that we provided before, but then a larger group happy to be using stat blocks. We are listening to both groups, but charting a course that will be solid for the class and healthy for the game. And so again, people will get to see the Druid visit again in our next player-dedicated UA. The one other class in UA 6 that will be returning to the future UA is the Monk.
Right.
So the Monk is the class that has appeared only once.
Yeah, so Playtest 6, overall, I thought Playtest 6 was okay. But the Monk was a disaster. Absolute disaster. And of course, Colby and I did a video where we kind of toured a new one because we were having trouble finding any changes that we actually liked. That's how bad it was. I should say to the base class. There was some good subclass stuff. Except for Open Hand Monk. We thought the subclasses showed improvement and some interesting ideas, and so we were more on board for what we saw with the subclasses. And I play tested the new Elements Monk, and it was fun to play. But that base class really drags it down
so far in this series. So we already planned on the Monk, whatever its score ended up being, unless it was like 100% satisfaction. We planned on the Monk appearing at least one more time, so that every class got to be in UA at least twice.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the Monk is going to come back. The Monk has a lot that we're going to be revisiting. There were a number of things in the class that scored really well, and then other things that were some significant pain points. If I were going to boil down where sort of the main pain points are, it's the constraints of discipline points. And so one of the things that we will be addressing in the next version of the Monk is how can we make it so that you do still have this resource you have to manage, but you don't feel like your class fantasy and also your effectiveness are being held back by those resource constraints. So it's, every class has resource constraints of some kind that they have to deal with. But we agree with...
The thing about discipline points or key points in the 2014 Player's Handbook is they're unlike other resources in that when the Monk does something, everything feeds from this one resource. Even with a spellcaster. Like if I play a sorcerer, I have spell slots and all my spells feed from that resource, but then I have sorcery points and I have metamagic that feeds from that resource. And I might have a subclass that has limited use features, and so that's another resource. But with monks, even with the subclasses, they can do something cool. It's going to cost discipline points. So it definitely needs some other kind of system than what they've got now. It's never been good. I was really surprised to see the Playtest 6 Monk come out, and the only change to key points was the name. It was really odd.
With the feedback that those restraints are a bit too tight right now in the Monk. One thing that will be changing in the next version is we are currently going through the Monk and looking for any place where there is both a usage limit and a discipline point cost on the same feature. That's too much constraint on the feature. Basically, the feature either needs a usage constraint, like you can use this only X number of times per day, or a discipline point cost, not both.
Right.
We're also looking at more places where we can lower discipline point costs, and even places where we can remove those costs. So we're...
For sure. Step of the Wind shouldn't cost discipline, for example. And they made it better, but it still cost discipline. But they could remove it, and it would be fine.
Excited about the version of the Monk we're working on now, based on this feedback. And we think we're going to see a lot of excitement about what people see next time. Here's the other thing, though, about the Monk. We're planning right now on just the Warrior of the Hand going back out of the Monk subclasses. That might change between now and then, but right now our plan is just...
Yeah. The other two subclasses could use especially the elements one, could use some polish. It's not perfect, but it is close enough that I think just a massage and it's probably fine. It probably doesn't need to go in a playtest again. Should be revised before it goes in the player's handbook, but fairly minor modifications, and I think it is perfectly usable. But yeah, the Warrior of the Hand or the Open Hand Monk was awful.
That one, because the Warrior of Shadow, the Warrior of the Elements, they both scored high enough that they don't need to go back out. I want to pause for a moment and say how remarkable that is.
Yeah.
The last time that we did a satisfaction survey on the Way of the Four Elements, it got 11% satisfaction.
Oh,
That is one of the lowest satisfaction scores of anything
in
we
history.
have anything
Yeah.
we have surveyed in this game. The new version, the Warrior of the Elements, made it into the 70s.
Nice.
So that is a massive jump. However, I said, Shadow and Elements are not going back out, at least right now. We'll see how our development goes. But for sure, the base class and Warrior of the Hand will be going back out for more feedback.
So he said the Druid in the next playtest, so that'll be playtest 9, I guess. And my guess is then, he might have said it and I missed it, but that the Monk will also be playtest 9, I hope. So I will be, of course, anticipating that because the Monk was such a disaster. I noticed maybe he still will mention it. Hang on.
But what this means is that Rogue, Ranger, Paladin, Cleric, and Bard, they're done in UA for now.
Oh, okay. That's what I was waiting for. What? The Bard in playtest 6 is unusable. And any feedback they got on that is kind of pointless because that Bard was based around, it was kind of a change in direction for Bard where there was this idea that they were this flexible caster that could access the Divine list or the Primal list or the Arcane list and eventually could access all 3 lists. And that was kind of the main theme of that class. And those spell lists no longer exist. So what's the main theme of the Bard now? And what is the play? It doesn't matter if players liked it. Are they going back to the 3 spell lists? Definitely, I have some questions about
And
what's happening with the
moving
Bard.
forward into now our development for the book itself. I do want
Should also mention that when we are playtesting, we can't use the Bard. And so if they don't put out another version, we will never be able to use the Bard in any playtest until we get a new player's handbook, which is unfortunate.
I want to pause for a moment and talk a little bit about the Ranger here. There were some pain points in the UA6 version of the Ranger where, some concern about favored enemy,
Hunter's Mark.
about foe slayer, and deft explorer. Those concerns brought down the satisfaction score of the class overall. We don't need to send this class back out though, because with the Ranger, we did an A/B test where we tried out different versions of the same features. The previous versions of those features scored so well that for the book, we're going to create a synthesis version where basically we take the best elements that have arisen in the class in the playtest and make sure that those are what get the spotlight in the...
Okay, so yeah, it was playtest, the Ranger playtest 4, I think, was the last Ranger. I don't quote me on that. Might have been playtest 3 now that I think about it. Was relatively popular, if memory serves. That was the expert classes playtest. So yeah, maybe they don't need our... It's one thing to say, well, I didn't like the playtest 6 Ranger, but it's another thing to say they need more playtest feedback to know what to do with the Ranger. And maybe that's the answer for the Bard too, because there was a previous Bard in the same playtest. playtest. I think it was 3, and I think it was relatively popular as well. So it might just be they'll take more ideas from that one than the most recent one, I suppose. Obviously, some things have to change on it, but that might be the answer.
The player's handbook. So essentially, we've gotten all the feedback we need on the Ranger. We see what people really like. We see what people really don't like. And we're going to steer toward the stuff that really excites people.
Awesome.
Also, while we're talking about the Ranger, another subclass that was wildly improved because the other subclass that was often like below 20% in satisfaction.
Yeah, he's going to talk about the Beastmaster, which was a pretty good job, I thought, in Playtest 6.
Down there with Way of the Four Elements was the Beastmaster.
Right.
Beastmaster this time around, 78% satisfaction.
Nice.
So again, great improvements, tons of excitement in the Rogue about Cunning Strike. Cunning Strike got 94% satisfaction. So
that's unheard of. I don't think he's ever mentioned anything getting over 90% in this playtest since it started. So this might be the most popular thing they've done in this entire playtest.
Cunning Strike, that new feature, it is clearly here to stay because Cunning Strike and Improved Cunning Strike were both hovering around 90% satisfaction. It is rare for anything in our massive D&D families, given the hundreds of thousands of people who play the game, the thousands of people who take our surveys.
Right.
It is rare for anything with that large of a group with many different tastes to hit 90% or higher. So if something does, when that rare thing happens, it's like, this is clearly here to stay because it is so rare for something to get that high. But even like in the Paladin, we had several things like Lay on Hands creeping up toward 90%, this new version of it. So a lot of really excited feedback here, as well as good constructive feedback for how we can improve a number of these things to make sure that in the 2024 versions of the books, they're the best they can be for this version of the game. Now, once we get the survey feedback for Unearthed Arcana 7, we will then see what other classes are moving straight into book development and which others may or may not need to go back out in the next Unearthed Arcana. That Unearthed Arcana will include any of those classes that need another round of public feedback. It will include them all together.
Okay.
So we've been doing this sort of leapfrogging thing for most of the year. The next Player's Handbook dedicated UA will have all of the remaining classes who need another Unearthed Arcana round.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. I'm sure he said the Druid was going out in the next playtest, right? That's what he said, which would be playtest 9. And then, or is playtest 9 not going to be a Player's Handbook based playtest? That might also be the case. It could be Monster Manual, because if the Druid is going out in the next Player's Handbook based playtest, and all the classes that are going to get a second version will be in the same playtest, then that means they have to have all the playtest 7 survey feedback, analyze it, make changes for it, develop new versions of any classes. Though I wouldn't be surprised if all the classes in playtest 7 do fine, because overall they're pretty good. I could see them all getting 70% or above, but nevertheless, we don't know, right? What if it turns out there was a large portion of the community that really hated this sorcerer? Well, then they need to redesign it and have it in the same playtest as the Druid. So maybe playtest 9 is going to be a while off, or maybe playtest... Yeah, I guess that would be my main guess, is that it might be a while before we see playtest 9.
Round.
Nice. I saw a lot of people asking about, but what about the Necromancer? Which is funny because historically Necromancer was never that popular. I thought I like Necromancers as a person.
The reason people were asking about what about the Necromancer was because Jeremy Crawford told Todd Kendrick in one of the first videos on the playtest that there would be a Necromancer. So we expected one, and when there wasn't one, it was surprising. Now, I assume there was a playtest version of the Necromancer, and there was probably playtest versions of more than 4 subclasses for all the classes, and they put in the 4 that they thought worked best at the time. So maybe plans changed. Plans change in when you're developing stuff.
Or even like culturally, I
But
like it, and
it
it was
was
in
a
the Dungeon
natural
Master's
question.
Guide in the first place. So it's just interesting that so many people brought it up.
So people have asked about the absence of the Necromancer in Unearthed Arcana 7, largely because earlier in the year,
You and I talked.
I mentioned that we were working on a new version of the Necromancer.
Yeah.
So that's on me. I brought it up. And in fact, our plan was for the Necromancer to be there. The Necromancer clearly is not there. And that's because as we have been working on the revised player's handbook and digging more into what subclasses do people actually play, which ones really excite people, also which ones fit into a nice spread of both aesthetic and mechanical options, we realized that the Necromancer, just in actual popularity, and here I mean actual play and satisfaction scores, the Necromancer has never scored well. And here again, I'm not talking about just satisfaction, I'm talking about actual play. This is significant for us because there are other things in the game that have not scored well in satisfaction, but still score well in actual play. A great example of this is the Ranger. The Ranger has always struggled, the 2014 Ranger,
Right.
when it comes to satisfaction scores because of some pain points, especially at the early levels of the class's design. Despite that fact, anytime we look at actual play statistics, the Ranger has never even been close to one of the least played classes. 2 of the least played classes in the game are the Druid and the Monk, and that's
Right.
been true for the last decade. However, the Druid is often satisfaction-wise scored high. So we always have to balance what do people say in surveys, but what are people actually playing?
Right.
And the issue with the Necromancer is it's low by both metrics.
Right.
Its satisfaction has traditionally been low.
I think the reason for it is probably because necromancy is not seen as heroic, right? It's kind of seen as more of a villainy thing. Now, there's no reason you can't make anti-heroes in your campaign or even have evil campaigns, but it is more common, I think, for people to play a hero type character, and Necromancer wasn't a clean fit for that. You could do it, but you had to be a little more creative than do the iconic Necromancer.
And the number of people playing it has been low. So the subclass that ended up subbing in for the Necromancer is the Abjurer, and that's for a number of reasons. One, the Abjurer is consistently rated very highly anytime we've done satisfaction surveys on wizard subclasses. It, in fact, is one of the highest rated among the subclasses. The Abjurer also has healthy play numbers. And the Abjurer is a nice distinction to the Evoker. And often when we've been deciding what will the quartet of subclasses be for each class, we're looking for subclasses that essentially represent different corners of a class's identity. The different quartets succeeded that at varying degrees, but this is a case where the Abjurer is a fantastic counterpoint to the Evoker, where we have the offensive wizard represented iconically by the Evoker, and the Abjurer being the ultimate defender.
Yeah, I've come to notice that is what they've done. I think the first time I actually really noticed it was when I looked at the Druid, and they had stars, then moon, then sea, and then land, and I'm like, oh, I get why these 4. That makes sense. And I've noticed it ever since that they don't just pick these subclasses randomly. There's a purpose to what they're doing.
Among our mage-like classes. And then the illusionist, if people are curious, the illusionist and the diviner are also a pair of opposites, because the illusionist is showing how you can use magic to beguile and deceive and misdirect, while the diviner is showing you can use magic to illuminate and clarify. At some point in a future video, we should go through and actually talk about all of the quartets, because our subclass decisions have often been chasing this notion. I've seen people wonder, for instance, about the presence of clockwork sorcery in the new player's handbook. Clockwork sorcery we chose not only because it was highly rated,
wild magic,
but
opposite of wild magic. Yeah, okay, I get it.
Because clockwork sorcery is the opposite of wild magic. One is the magic of chaos, and the other is the magic of order. The new player's handbook, by the way, is going to be explicit about these quartets. In our character creation guidance in the new book, as we help guide you in subclass selection, we're going to point out this sort of archetypal space that each subclass occupies, because that's not always obvious, especially if you're not familiar with the game. You just see the names. And we wanted to make sure that when we talk about the subclass options in a particular class, that there's sort of a clear set of aesthetic and mechanical hooks. In some classes, the aesthetic hooks are mightier than the mechanical hooks, and then in other classes, the mechanical hooks are bigger than the aesthetic hooks. An example of a class where the hooks tend to be more mechanical than aesthetic is the fighter, where the quartet in the fighter is actually about 4 very different ways of play. And again, that can be for a future video where we delve into the subclass quartets of every class in the 2024 Player's Handbook.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching. Thanks. Be sure to test out this new UA. Thank you for all the survey results, and fill out more survey results.
Yes.
We appreciate your feedback. You are literally helping us build the game. So thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, so now that we're done with the survey responses, I just want to let people know that, yes, on Monday, I'll be releasing a fighter video, and then likely next Friday, I will have a video for the Cantrips in this UA. But I'm not abandoning Playtest 7. There's still a lot to go through, and I intend to go through it. So, just so you know. But only so much time, so I'm working as fast as I can. But yeah, we'll talk to you later, people.